Every century, the fog brings it back. A ship with bleeding sails and a crew of frozen, watching eyes. This time, it's not just the town it wants. It's me, Elias Kane, 16 Greyhaven's last hope against the hunger of the deep.
Chapter 1. The fog that whispers the sea was quiet, too quiet. The kind of still that makes your skin prickle and your ears strain for a sound that never comes. In the small fishing town of Greyhaven, nestled on a jagged cliff overlooking the Atlantic, the morning had started like any other. Fishermen hauled nets, gulls screeched, and the salty air clung to everything. But by noon, a strange fog rolled in, thick as soup, swallowing the horizon. It wasn't the usual mist that hugged the coast. This fog moved with purpose, curling around the docks, creeping up the cobblestone streets, and pressing against the windows of the weathered homes. Elias Kane, a boy of 16 with a mop of dark hair and eyes too old for his face, stood on the pier, his boots scuffed from years of running errands for the fishermen. He wasn't one of them, not really. His father had been, but the sea took him 5 years ago, leaving Elias with a mother who stared out windows and a sister who cried too much. He worked odd jobs now, mending nets, scrubbing 26 cleaning holes, anything to keep food on the table. Today, though, work was far from his mind. The fog had everyone spooked. Old sailors muttered about ghost ships and cursed waters, their voices low as if the fog itself might hear. Elias squinted into the haze. The air felt heavy, like it was, holding its breath. He'd seen fog before. Greyhaven was no stranger to it, but this was different. It shimmered faintly, like threads of silver woven through it, and it carried a smell, not of salt and fish, but something sharp, metallic, almost alive. He shivered, pulling his coat tighter. The other boys on the dock had gone home, their laughter fading as the fog thickened. Elias stayed. Something about the quiet pulled at him, like a hook in his gut. Elias, get inside, called Old Man Harrow from the bait shop, his voice rough but kind. Harrow was a grizzled fisherman, his face like leather left too long in the sun. He'd known Elias's father, told stories of their fishing days when the ale flowed. Elias liked him, trusted him, but he didn't move. Just a minute, Elias called back, his eyes fixed on the water. He couldn't explain it, but he felt something out there, something watching. The fog seemed to pulse, like a heartbeat, and for a moment, he swore he heard a whisper low, hissing sound, not quite words, but close. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the waves. It was something else, something that made his heart thump, hard against his ribs. Harrow stomped over, his pipe clenched between his teeth. Boy, you deaf. This ain't a day for lingering. Fog like this brings trouble. He grabbed Elias's arm, not rough, but firm, and pulled him toward the shop. Elias didn't fight it. Harrow had seen things on the sea most men wouldn't speak of, and his warnings carried weight. Inside, the bait shop smelled of fish and tobacco. A lantern flickered on the counter, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. Harrow locked the door, an odd thing for midday, and sat Elias down by the stove. "You hear anything out there?" he asked, his eyes sharp dot. Elias hesitated. He didn't want to sound like a kid scared of shadows. Maybe like whispers. Not clear though. Harrow's face tightened. He puffed his pipe, the smoke curling, up like the fog outside. "Old tales," he said after a pause. "My granddad spoke of a ship. Showed up every 100 years, give or take. No name, no flag, just a shadow in the mist. Crew frozen, not dead, not alive. Eyes open, watching. Said it came with a fog like this one. Called it the ship that sailed into nowhere. Elias's stomach twisted. He'd heard stories like that, told late at night when the men thought he wasn't listening. Ghost ships, cursed to wander, their crews trapped by some dark deal. He'd laughed them off before, but now, with the fog pressing against the windows, those tales felt heavier. That's just stories, Elias said, trying to sound brave. Right. Harrow didn't answer right away. He tapped his pipe against the counter, his eyes far off. Maybe, but I've seen things out there. Lights where no lights should be. Voices in the waves. My granddad swore he saw that ship once, back in 23. Said it glowed, not natural, like starlight trapped in ice. He never sailed again after that. Elias wanted to laugh, to shake off the chill creeping up his spine, but he couldn't. The whispers he'd heard weren't his imagination. They were real, and they weren't friendly. He thought of his father, lost to a storm that came out of nowhere, and wondered if the sea held secrets it wasn't ready to share. By evening, the fog hadn't lifted. If anything, it was thicker, the town smothered in it. Elias went home, a small house at the edge of Greyhaven, where his mother, Clara, was stirring soup over the stove, and his sister Lila was drawing pictures at the table. Lila was 10, all skinny limbs and big eyes, always sketching ships or waves. Today, her drawings were different dark shapes in a swirl of grey, like the fog had slipped into her pencil. Elias, you're late, Clara said, her voice tired but sharp. She looked older than her 38 years, her hair streaked with grey, her hands worn from sewing nets to make ends meet. You smell like the sea. Wash up. He nodded, but his mind was still on the dock. At dinner, he didn't mention the whispers. Clara had enough worries, and Leela didn't need nightmares. But as they ate, the fog pressed closer, seeping under the door, curling round the chairs. Clara noticed it too, her spoon pausing mid-air. This ain't right, she muttered. Fog don't move like that. Leela looked up, her eyes wide. It's like a story, she said, like the sea's hiding something. Don't talk like that, Clara snapped, but her voice shook. She stood, checked the windows, and locked them tight. Elias watched, his food untouched. He couldn't shake the feeling that the fog was alive, that it was looking for something or someone. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. The whispers followed him, faint but there, slipping through the cracks in the walls. He lay in his small room, the ceiling stained from leaks, and listened. The words weren't clear, but they felt old, older than Greyhaven, older than the sea itself. He got up, careful not to wake Clara or Leela, and slipped outside. The fog was so thick he could barely see his own hands. The air tasted sharp, like biting a coin, and the whispers were louder now. A chorus of voices that weren't human. He walked to the cliff's edge, where the sea stretched out, hidden by the fog. And then he saw it a shadow in the mist, tall and sharp, like the outline of a ship. It wasn't moving, but it wasn't still either. It shimmered, like the fog itself was part of it, and a light flickered from its deck, pale and cold, not like any lantern he'd ever seen. His heart pounded, but his feet moved forward, drawn to the edge where the rocks met the water. The whispers grew clearer. Not words, but feelings. Hunger, longing, something vast and empty. Elias's breath. Caught, he'd heard of men lost to the sea, pulled by lights they couldn't explain. He thought of his father, of the stories Harrow told, of the ship that sailed into nowhere. Was this it? Was it real? He stopped at the cliff's edge, the sea roaring below, the fog wrapping around him like a hand. The ship was closer now, its shape clear at all masts, ragged sails, and figures on the deck, still as statues but watching. Their eyes glinted, alive in a way that made his blood cold. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't move. The light from the ship pulsed, calling him, and the whispers sang of secrets, of promises, of things no boy should know. Elias didn't know how long he stood there, but the fog seemed to hold him, to want him. He thought of his father, of the storm that took him, and wondered if this was what had called him out that night. The ship was no story. It was here, and it knew his name. Chapter 2. The uncharted wake. The fog clung to Greyhaven like a shroud, refusing to lift even as dawn broke, grey and heavy. Elias Kane hadn't slept. The shadow of the ship lingered in his mind, its pale light burning behind his eyes. He'd stood on the cliff until the cold drove him back, the whispers fading but never gone. Now, sitting at the kitchen table, he picked at his breakfast, a lump of bread and cold fish. His mother, Clara, was already at her sewing, her needle flashing in the dim light. Lila, his sister, was sketching again, her pencil scratching out shapes that looked too much like the ship he'd seen. "You're quiet," Clara said, not looking up. Her voice was sharp, but Elias knew it was worry, not anger. "What's eating you?" "Nothing," Elias lied, his throat tight. He couldn't tell her about the ship, not yet. She'd think he was chasing ghosts, like the men who drank too much and saw mermaids in the waves. But Leela's eyes flicked to him, curious, like she knew he was hiding something. "Elias saw something," Leela said, her voice small but sure. She held up her drawing, a jagged outline of a ship, its sails torn, surrounded by swirls of fog. "Didn't you?" Clara's needle stopped. She looked at Elias, her face pale. "What's she talking about?" He shrugged, forcing a smile. "Just fog, made me jumpy, that's all." But his hands shook as he tore the bread. Clara didn't push, but her eyes stayed on him, heavy with doubt. By mid-morning, Elias was back at the docks, the fog still thick, the air sharp with that strange metallic temps. The pier was empty, the fishermen staying home, their boats tied. Tight, old man Harrow was there, though, leaning against the bait shop, his pipe sending curls of smoke into the haze. He looked older today, his eyes sunken, like he hadn't slept either. "You saw it, didn't you?" Harrow said, not a question. His voice was low, rough as the rocks below the cliff. Elias froze. "Saw what?" Harrow puffed his pipe, staring into the fog. "The ship, same one my granddad saw. You got that look, boy. Like you've seen something you can't unsee." Elias's heart thudded. He wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, but Harrow's eyes pinned him. I saw something," he admitted. "Out there, last night. A shadow, a light, and eyes." Harrow nodded like he'd expected it. "It's real, then. The ship that sailed into nowhere. Shows up every 100 years, give or take. Brings nothing but trouble." He tapped his pipe against the wall, ash falling like snow. "My granddad said it don't follow no map. Its way kit's patent, natural. Leads to places no man's. Meant to go." Elias's mouth went dry. "What kind of places?" Harrow's eyes darkened. "Places where the sea ain't just water, where the stars don't shine right, where time bends. The words hung in the air, heavy as the fog. Elias wanted to ask more, but a shout cut through the haze. It was Tom Wren, a young fisherman who'd taken over his father's boat last year. He was running down the pier, his face white, his hands shaking. "Harrow, Elias, you gotta see this." Tom's voice cracked like he'd seen a ghost. He pointed to the water, where the fog parted just enough to show the harbor's edge. There, in the shallows, the water moved wrong. It rippled outward, like something big had passed, but there was no ship, no boat, just a waker trail of foam and bubbles that stretched into the fog, heading nowhere. Harrow cursed under his breath. "That's its mark," he said. "The ship's wake. Ain't no tide or current does that." Elias stared at the water, his stomach twisting. The wake was too straight, too perfect, like it had been drawn with a ruler. It didn't curve or fade like a normal wake. It just went disappearing into the fog. He felt that pull again, the same one from last night, urging him to follow. "Don't," Harrow said, grabbing his arm. "You go after that. You don't come back the same, if you come back at all." But Elias couldn't look away. The wake called to him like the whispers, like the light. He thought of his father, lost to a storm no one could explain. Was this what had taken him? Was the ship waiting out there, holding answers? "I need to know," Elias said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. "I need to see it." Harrow's grip tightened, then let go. He sighed, like he'd seen this before. "You're your father's son, all right, stubborn as the sea. Take my skiff, but don't go far. And if you hear those whispers again, row back fast." Elias nodded, his heart racing. Harrow's skiff was small, barely big enough for two, but it was sturdy. He untied it, climbed in, and pushed off, the oars creaking as he rowed into the fog. The wake was still there, a silver thread in the water, guiding him. The fog swallowed the shore, leaving him alone with the sea and the whispers, louder now, weaving through the air like a song he couldn't understand. He rowed for what felt like hours, though the sun never showed through the fog. The wake led him farther than he'd planned, the water growing darker, deeper. The air grew colder, the metallic smell stronger, stinging his nose. The whispers were clearer now, not words but feelings, hunger, sorrow, a longing so deep it hurt. Elias's arms ached, but he kept going, driven by something he couldn't name. Then he saw it. The ship. It loomed out of the fog, taller than any ship he'd seen, its masts like black bones against the grey. Its hull was old, weathered, but it glowed faintly, like moonlight trapped in wood. The sails hung in tatters, yet they fluttered, as if moved by a wind he couldn't feel. And on the deck, figures stood, still as statues, their eyes glinting in the dim light. Elias stopped rowing, his breath caught. The ship was close now, too close. The wake led right to it, and the water around. It was wrong to still, like glass, reflecting nothing but darkness. He saw the figures clearer now, men in old clothes, coats and hats from a time he didn't know, their faces pale, their eyes alive, watching him. One figure stood at the bow, taller than the rest, its face hidden in shadow, but Elias felt its gaze, heavy and cold. The whispers surged, filling his head, not with words, but with images, stars falling, seas boiling, a sky without light. He gripped the oars, his knuckles white. He wanted to turn back, but the ship's light pulsed, calling him closer. The skiff drifted forward, pulled by something stronger than the tide. Then he saw it, a book, lying open on the deck, its pages glowing like the ship. It wasn't big, but it felt important, like it held the answers to the whispers, to the ship, to everything. Elias's hands shook. He could row away, go back to Greyhaven, to Clara and Leela, to a life of nets and fish. Or he could climb aboard, take the book, and face whatever this ship was. The whispers sang louder, promising secrets, promising truth. Elias's heart pounded. He thought of his father, of the storm, of the eyes watching him from the deck. He tied the skiff to the ship's side, his hands moving before his mind could stop them. The wood was cold, slick with something that wasn't water. He climbed, his boots slipping, his breath loud in the silence. The deck was empty, but the figures were there, frozen, their eyes following him. The air was heavy, like it was pressing him down. The book was close now, its pages fluttering, though there was no wind. Elias reached for it, his fingers trembling. The whispers screamed, not in his ears, but in his bones, and as he touched the book, the ship shuddered like it was alive. He opened it. The pages were filled with writing he couldn't read, symbols that twisted and moved, glowing like the fog. And then he saw his name written in ink that looked too red, too fresh. The whispers stopped. The ship was silent, but the eyes were still watching, and the tall figure at the bow turned, its face still hidden, but its voice clear in his head. You've come. Chapter 3. Faces in the frosty Elias Kane's hand trembled as he clutched the glowing book, its pages cold against his fingers. The ship's deck creaked under his boots, though no wind stirred the tattered sails above. The fog pressed closer, thick and alive, wrapping the ship that sailed into nowhere like a cocoon. The figures on the decks leant, frozen, stared at him, their eyes glinting with a life that didn't belong in their pale, frost-covered faces. Each one looked carved. From ice, their mouths twisted in silent screams, their hands gripping ropes or rails, as if time had stopped mid-motion. Yet their eyes moved, tracking Elias, and he felt their gaze like needles in his skin. He wanted to run, to leap back to the skiff and row to Greyhaven, but the book held him. His name, written in that red, wet ink, burned in his mind. The tall figure at the bow hadn't moved, its face still hidden in shadow, but its voice echoed in his head. You've come. Elias's heart pounded, his breath shallow. The air tasted sharp, metallic, like blood and rust, and the whispers he'd heard before were gone, replaced by a silence so deep it hurt. He took a step back, the book heavy in his hands. The deck was slick, coated in a thin layer of frost that sparkled in the ship's pale glow. He glanced at the nearest figure, a man in a tattered coat, his beard crusted with ice, his eyes wide and alive. Elias froze. The man's face was wrong, not just frozen, but changing, like a mask slipping. For a moment, it looked like his father's same sharp jaw, same dark eyes, then it shifted back, a stranger again. Elias's stomach lurched. He stumbled, nearly dropping the book. Don't look at them, a voice rasped, low and rough, not in his head, but real. Elias spun, his boots slipping. At the edge of the deck stood a boy, no older than him, maybe 15, in clothes too big, gear from another time, all patched and faded. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, but they weren't frozen like the others. He looked real, alive, though his hands shook as he gripped a rope. Who are you? Elias asked, his voice cracking. He held the book tighter, like a shield. The boy's eyes flicked to the figures, then back to Elias. Don't matter who I am. You shouldn't be here. Nobody should. His voice was thin, like he hadn't spoken in years. Put the book down and go, before it sees you, before what sees me. Elias's throat was dry. He glanced at the tall figure at the bow, still unmoving, its shadows stretching too long across the deck. The boy shook his head, his lips tight. You felt it, the thing that calls. It's in the book, in the ship, in them. He nodded at the frozen figures. They ain't dead, they ain't alive, neither. And they want you to join them. Elias's skin crawled. He looked at the figures again, their eyes still locked on him. One, a woman in a torn dress, had a face that flickered, showing Clara's features for a heartbeat before shifting back. Another, a man with a scarred cheek, looked like Harrow, then didn't. Elias's breath hitched. They look like people I know. They do that, the boy said, stepping closer, his boots silent on the frosted deck. They pull faces from your head, makes you stay, makes you think it's safe. He pointed at the book. That's what it wants. You read it, you're theirs. Elias looked down at the book, its pages glowing faintly, the symbols twisting like worms. His name was still there, red and fresh, but now other names appeared, fading in and out. Clara, Leela, Harrow, his father. He slammed it shut, his hands shaking. What is this thing? The boy's eyes darkened. It's the ship's heart. Keeps M trapped, keeps it sailing. Every 100 years, it comes back, looking for more. You touched it. It knows you. Now, Elias's legs felt weak. He backed toward the skiff, the book still in his hands. I'm not staying. I'm going back. You can't, the boy said, his voice flat. Not with that. It won't let you. He glanced at the tall figure, and for the first time, Elias saw fear in his eyes. It's waking. The ship groaned, a deep, bone-shaking sound, like it was alive. The frost on the deck cracked, thin lines spreading like veins. The figure's eyes glowed brighter, and their mouths moved, not speaking but shaping silent words. Elias's heart raced. He turned to run, but the skiff was gone, the rope he'd tied it with dangling over the side. Cut clean. No, he whispered, his voice lost in the fog. The sea around the ship was still, black as ink, reflecting nothing. The fog swirled, forming shapes, faces, things with too many eyes. The whispers returned, not in his head but in the air, a chorus of voices begging, screaming, calling his name. Give it back, the boy said, his voice urgent now. He was closer, his hand outstretched. The book. Drop it. It's your only chance. Elias clutched it tighter, his mind spinning. The book felt alive, pulsing like a heartbeat. He didn't want it, but he couldn't let go. It was his father's face in the frost, his sister's drawings, the answers to why the sea took so much. I need to know, he said, his voice barely a whisper. The boy's face twisted, half pity, half anger. You don't know what you're asking. I did the same. Look at me. He pulled back his sleeve, showing an arm pale and thin, with frost creeping up his skin, like it was claiming him. I touched it too. 100 years ago, Elias's blood went cold. You're one of them. Not yet, the boy said, his voice breaking. But I'm close. You will be too, if you don't let go. The ship groaned again, louder, and the tall figure at the bow moved, its head turning slowly. Elias couldn't see its face, but he felt its gaze, heavy, like a stone on his chest. The fog thickened, the whispers now a scream, and the frozen figures stepped forward. their movements jerky, like puppets on strings. Their faces shifted. Clara, Lila, his father, Harrowich, one flickering, then gone, replaced by strangers. With hollow eyes, Elias stumbled back, his boots slipping on the frost. The book burned in his hands, not hot but cold, so cold it hurt. He wanted to drop it, but his fingers wouldn't move. The boy grabbed his arm, his touch like ice. "Run," he hissed. Now, Elias tore free, his legs moving before his mind. Caught up, he ran for the edge of the deck, the book still in his hands, the figures closing in. Their hands reached, frost falling from their fingers like snow. The tall figure's voice boomed in his head. "You are ours." He reached the rail. The sea below, black and endless. No skiff, no way back. The fog swirled, showing glimpses of Greyhaven's cliffs, so far away. The whispers screamed, the figures closed in, and the book pulsed, its glow brighter, pulling him back. Elias's eyes stung, his chest tight. He thought of Lila's drawings, Clara's tired face, his father's laugh. He couldn't stay here, couldn't be one of them. With a yell, he threw the book to the deck. It landed with a thud, its glow fading, the pages still. The figures stopped, their eyes dimming, but the tall figure moved closer, its shadow swallowing the deck. Elias didn't wait. He climbed the rail, his heart in his throat, and jumped. The water hit like a fist, cold and hard, dragging him down. He kicked, his lungs burning, the whispers faint but still there, calling him back. He broke the surface, gasping, the fog thick above him. The ship was gone, the sea empty, but the wake was there, silver and straight. Stretching into the dark, Elias swam, his arms heavy, his body numb. He didn't know if he was swimming toward Greyhaven or nowhere, but he kept going, the faces in the frost burned into his mind. The boy's words echoed, "It knows you now." He'd escaped the ship, but something told him it wasn't done with him. The sea held its secrets tight, and Elias Kane was part of them now. Chapter 4. The lanterns curse. Elias Kane's lungs burned as he swam through the black water, the fog swallowing the world above. His arms ached, heavy from cold, but he kept moving. Driven by the faces in the frost, their eyes still watching him in his mind. The ship that sailed into nowhere was gone, vanished into the mist, but its wake lingered, a silver thread in the sea, pointing him toward Greyhaven, or so he hoped. The whispers were faint now, distant, like a song stuck in his head, but they hadn't stopped. They called his name, soft and hungry, promising secrets he didn't want to know. The sea was endless, the fog a wall of grey. Elias's teeth chattered, his body numb, but he kicked harder, his boots dragging like weights. He thought of Clara's worried face, Lila's drawings, the boy on the ship with frost creeping up his arm. "It knows you now," the boy had said. Elias didn't know what it was, but he felt it, a shadow in his chest, heavy and cold. The book he'd thrown down, its red ink names, his included, felt like a hook in his soul. Pulling him back, a light flickered ahead, faint but steady. Cutting through the fog, Elias's heart leaped. A boat, a lighthouse. He swam toward it, his strokes desperate. The light grew brighter, not warm like a fire, but cold, pale, like the glow of the ship. His stomach twisted, but he couldn't stop. The sea was too vast, too dark, and he was too tired to turn back. The light came from a lantern, hanging from a rusted chain on a small, weathered boat. Not his skiff, it was too old, its wood cracked, its sides slick with something green and slimy. The lantern swung gently, though the air was still. its glass cracked but glowing with that same unnatural light he'd seen on the ship. Elias grabbed the boat's edge, his fingers slipping, and hauled himself aboard, gasping. The deck was small, barely room for him to sit, and it rocked under his weight, unsteady, like it didn't belong in the water. He collapsed, shivering, his clothes soaked. The lantern's light bathed him, cold as frost, and he felt it watching, like the eyes on the ship. He crawled to it, his hands shaking, and saw carvings on its base symbols like the ones in the book, twisting, moving, never still. His name wasn't there, but he felt it should be. The air grew sharper, metallic, like before, and the whispers returned, louder, weaving through the fog. Look, see, stay. Elias's head throbbed. He wanted to smash the lantern, to throw it into the sea, but his hands wouldn't move. The light pulsed, slow and steady, like a heartbeat, and images flashed. In his mind, waves rising, stars falling, faces screaming in the dark. He saw his father standing on a deck like this one, his eyes wide, reaching for a light just like this. Then the image shifted, showing Clara, Lila, their faces pale, frost on their skin, their eyes alive and trapped. No, Elias whispered, his voice hoarse. He tore his eyes from the lantern, but the boat was moving, not rocking but gliding, following the silver wake. He grabbed the oars, but they were stuck, fused to the wood by frost. The boat wasn't his anymore. It belonged to the sea, to the ship, to the light. The fog parted, and there it was, again the ship that sailed into nowhere. Its masts loomed, black and jagged, its sails hanging like torn skin. The figures on the deck were still there, frozen, their eyes glowing brighter now, locked on him. The tall figure at the bow stood unmoving, its shadow stretching across the water, reaching for the boat. Elias's heart pounded. He hadn't escaped. The ship had let him go, only to pull him. Back the lantern flared, its light blinding. Elias shielded his eyes, but the glow burned through, showing him things he couldn't understand. Sky without stars, a sea that stretched forever, a city of black stone under the waves, its spires sharp and wrong. The whispers sang louder, not words but feelings, hunger, loss, a promise of forever. Elias's hands shook, his fingers inching toward the lantern. Drawn like a moth. Don't touch it, a voice said, sharp and close. The boy from the ship was there, standing on the water, his feet sinking slightly, frost creeping up his legs now. His face was paler, his eyes desperate. It's cursed. The lantern, the book, the ship there, all one. They trap you. Elias' hand froze, inches from the lantern. How do you know? He asked, his voice trembling. The boy's lips twisted, half a smile, half a grimace. I touched it 100 years ago. Thought I could save my PA. Thought I could know the sea's secrets. Now I'm this. He held up his hands, frost cracking on his skin, falling like dust. You touch it, you're bound, like them. He nodded toward the ship, where the figures stood, their faces flickering. Clara, Lila, his father. Then strangers again. Elias's chest tightened. Why me? Why my name? The boy's eyes darkened. It knows who seeks it, who wants answers. Your pa was the same. He came looking, too. Elias's breath caught. His father, the storm that took him. The stories of lights in the fog. He was here, he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The boy nodded. He touched the light, like you touched the book. It marked him. It marks you now. The lantern pulsed again, and Elias felt it pull, not just his body but his mind, his heart. He saw his father's face in the frost, his eyes alive, pleading. He saw Lila's drawings, Clara's tired hands, the life he'd left on the shore. He wanted to go back, but the lantern promised truth, promised his father's fate, promised the sea's secrets. He stood, his legs shaky, and stepped back from the lantern. "I won't," he said, more to himself than the boy. "I'm going home." The boy laughed, a hollow sound. "You think it's that easy? You're in its wake. It don't let go." The boat lurched, the water churning, and the ship loomed closer, its hull filling the sky. The figures on the deck moved, slow and jerky, their hands reaching, frost falling like snow. The tall figure's shadow grew, its voice in his head, "You belong." The lantern flared, its light swallowing the fog, and Elias felt his will slipping, his feet moving toward it. He screamed, a raw, desperate sound, and kicked the lantern. It fell, its chains snapping, and hit the deck, the glass shattering. The light didn't die. It spread, crawling up the boat, frosting the wood, creeping toward his boots. The boy grabbed his arm, his touch burning cold. "Run," he yelled, pulling Elias to the edge. Elias jumped, the water hitting like ice, dragging him down. He kicked, his lungs screaming, the whispers louder now, calling him back. The lantern's light followed, glowing under the waves, chasing him. He broke the surface, gasping, the fog thick, the ship gone again. But the wake was there, silver and straight, leading nowhere. He swam, his body screaming, his mind full of faces his father, the boy, the figures in the frost. The lantern's curse was real, and it had marked him, just like the book. Greyhaven was out there, somewhere, but the sea felt bigger now, hungrier. Elias didn't know if he was swimming to shore or deeper into the ship's grasp, but he kept going, the whispers in his ears, the light in his eyes, and the cold sinking into his bones. Chapter 5. Echoes of a silent scream. Elias Kane thrashed in the icy water, his limbs heavy, his breath ragged. The fog was a thick veil, hiding Greyhaven, hiding everything but the silver wake that stretched behind him, pointing back to the ship that sailed into nowhere. The lantern's cold light still burned in his mind, its shattered glow chasing him under the waves. Though the boat was gone, swallowed by the sea or the fog, the whispers were softer now, but they lingered, weaving through the air like threads of a dream he couldn't shake. They weren't words, not really, but they carried pain, loss, a scream that never found voice. He swam, his body numb, his heart pounding with the memory of the ship, its frost-covered figures. Their eyes alive, the tall shadow at the bow, the book with his name in red ink. The boy's warning echoed. "It knows you now." Elias didn't understand what it was, but he felt its weight, like a chain around his chest, pulling him back. The sea wasn't just water anymore. It was alive, watching, hungry. The shore was a faint shadow in the fog, a jagged line of cliffs. Elias's arms burned, his legs weak, but he kept going, driven by thoughts of Clara's tired face, Lila's drawings, the home he'd left behind. The whispers grew louder, sharper, and for a moment he heard his father's voice, low and broken, calling his name. He stopped, treading water, his breath catching. "Pa," he whispered, his voice lost in the fog. The sea was silent, but the wake glowed brighter, urging him to turn back. A wave hit, hard and cold, pushing him under. He kicked, breaking the surface, and saw it a flicker of light. Not the lantern's pale glow, but something warmer, orange, real. A fire. Greyhaven's cliffs were closer now, the fog thinning just enough to show the rocks, the pier, the town's faint outline. Elias swam harder, his chest tight, the whispers fading but not gone. The sea fought him, its currents pulling, like hands grabbing his ankles. He thought of the boy, frost creeping up his arm, trapped for 100 years. He wouldn't let that be him. His feet hit sand, and he stumbled onto the shore, coughing, his clothes heavy with water. The fog was thinner here, but it still clung to the cliffs, curling like fingers around the rocks. The fire came from a small camp near the pier, where Old Man Harrow stood, his pipe glowing red in the dark. He saw Elias and ran over, his face tight with worry. "Boy, you're alive." Harrow grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the fire. "Thought the sea took you, like your His voice was rough, but his hands were steady, wrapping a blanket around Elias's shoulders. The warmth felt wrong after the cold of the ship, like it didn't belong to him anymore. Elias sat, shivering, the fire's heat stinging his skin. "I saw it," he said, his voice hoarse. "The ship, the figures, the book." He didn't mention the lantern, the boy, the faces in the frost. They felt too big, too heavy, like saying them would make them real again. Harrow's eyes narrowed, his pipe forgotten. "You went aboard." His voice was low, like he was scared the fog would hear. "What did you see?" Elias's throat tightened. He saw his father's face in the frost, Clara's, Lila's, all mixed with strangers, their eyes alive, trapped. He saw the book, his name in red, the lantern's glow, the boy's warning. "They're not dead," he said finally. "The crew, there, stuck, watching, and something's with them, something big." Harrow cursed, spitting into the fire. "The ship that sailed into nowhere. My granddad warned me, said it wasn't just a ship, it's a cage, for souls, maybe worse." He leaned closer, his eyes sharp. "What did you touch, boy? You don't come back from that ship the same." Elias's hands shook. He thought of the book, the lantern, the cold that sank into his bones. "A book," he admitted. "It had my name, and a lantern. It showed me things, my pa, the sea, something under it." Harrow's face went pale. He stood, pacing, his boots crunching on the sand. A lantern, glowing, cold, like starlight. Elias nodded, and Harrow's jaw tightened. "That's the curse. My granddad saw it too. Said it showed him his brother, lost at sea. Made him want to stay. It's how it traps you. Shows you what you want, then takes you." Elias's stomach twisted. He'd seen his father, Clara, Lila. He'd felt the pull, the promise of answers. "I didn't keep it," he said. "I threw the book down, kicked the lantern. It broke." Harrow stopped pacing, his eyes wide. "You broke it," he laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Ain't that simple, boy? You touched it. It marked you. You feel it, don't you? The cold, the whispers." Elias nodded, his throat dry. He felt it now, even by the fire chill in his bones, a hum in his ears, like the sea was still calling. "What is it?" he asked. "The ship, the lantern. What's it want?" Harrow sat, his face grim. "Old stories say it's old as the sea. Older maybe. A ship that made a deal, not with men, but with something else. Something that lives where the water meets the dark. It sails to collect, to keep. Every 100 years, it comes for more. Souls, maybe, or something worse. Elias's heart thudded. "My pa," he said, his voice breaking. He was on it. I saw his face. Harrow's eyes softened, just for a moment. "Maybe, or maybe it's showing you what you want, to pull you in. That's how it works. Uses your heart against you." The fire crackled, but the warmth didn't reach Elias. He thought of the boy trapped for a century, his frost-covered arm. There was a boy, he said. Said he touched the lantern, too. Said he was looking for his Harrow's pipe fell, ash scattering. A boy, his voice was barely a whisper. My granddad spoke of one. A lad who climbed aboard, back in 23, never came back. Said he was the last they saw before the ship vanished. Elias's blood went cold. The boy had been real, not a ghost, not yet, but he was fading, claimed by the frost. He helped me, Elias said, told me to run. Harrow shook his head. Then you're lucky, boy. Most don't get help. Most don't come back. He stood, looking out at the fog, still thick over the water. But it ain't done with you. You touched its heart. It'll call again. Elias wanted to argue, to say he was free, but the cold in his bones said otherwise. The whispers were faint, but they were there, echoing like a scream caught in glass. He thought of the ship's timbers, groaning like they were alive, the figure's eyes, the tall shadow's voice. You are ours. He stood, the blanket falling. I need to go home, he said, his voice steady despite the fear. Clara and Lila, they need me. Harrow nodded, but his eyes were dark. Go, but stay away from the water. And if you hear those whispers, don't listen, they'll pull you back. Elias ran, the fog swirling around him, the cliffs looming like giants. Greyhaven's streets were empty, the houses dark, the fog pressing against windows like it wanted in. He reached his house, his hands shaking as he fumbled with the door. Clara was at the table, her sewing untouched, her face pale. Lila was beside her, clutching a drawing a ship, its deck covered in figures, their faces blank but their eyes alive. Elias. Clara ran to him, her hands on his face, checking for wounds. Where were you, we thought. Her voice broke, and she pulled him close, her arms trembling. I'm okay, Elias lied, his voice thick. He looked at Lila's drawing, his stomach twisting. Where'd you see that? He asked, pointing at the ship. Lila's eyes were wide, scared. In my head, she said. Since the fog came, I keep seeing it, and I heard you calling me. Elias's heart stopped. The whispers weren't just his. They were reaching for Lila too. He thought of the faces in the frost, her face among them. The ship wasn't done. It had marked him, and now it was looking at his family. The fog pressed against the windows, and the whispers returned, soft but clear, echoing a silent scream that never stopped. Chapter 6. The starless Elias Kane sat at the kitchen table, his hands still trembling from the cold that clung to him, though the fire in the hearth roared. The fog outside pressed against the windows of the small Greyhaven house, seeping through cracks, curling like fingers. Clara's eyes were red, her sewing untouched, and Lila clutched her latest drawn a ship with glowing eyes on its deck, surrounded by a sea that looked too black, too deep. The whispers Elias had heard on the ship that sailed into nowhere were faint now, but they lingered in his ears, a hum of hunger and sorrow, echoing Lila's words. I heard you, calling me. You're not going back out there, Clara said, her voice sharp but shaking. She stood, pacing, her hands twisting a rag. Not after last night. The sea's no place for you, Elias. Not after your PA. Elias wanted to argue, to say he was fine, but the chill in his bones and the memory of the frost-covered figures stopped him. He saw their eyes alive, trapped, flickering with faces he knew. His father, Clara, Lila, the boy on the ship, frost creeping up his arm, had warned him, "It knows you now." The lantern's curse, the book with his name in red ink, they'd marked him. And now the ship was reaching for his family. "I won't," he said, his voice low, but he didn't believe it. The sea called, not with words, but with a pull, like a tide in his blood. He looked at Leela, her small hands smudging charcoal on the paper. "Leela, you can't listen to it. The voices, they're not me." She nodded, her eyes wide, but her fingers kept moving, sketching waves that curled into shape-size hands, things that didn't belong. "It's loud," she whispered, "like it's inside me." Clara froze, her rag falling. "What's she talking about?" Voices. "Elias, what did you do?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. How could he explain the ship, the figures, the lantern's glow that showed him his father's face? How could he tell her the sea wasn't just water anymore, but something alive, something that wanted them? "I saw something," he said finally. "A ship, it's not right. It's old, cursed maybe. It knows us." Clara's face hardened. "No more stories. You sound like your PA chasing ghosts. It's fog, Elias, fog and fear." But her voice shook, and her eyes flicked to the window, where the fog pressed closer, thicker than ever. A knock rattled the door, sharp and sudden. Elias jumped, his heart thudding. Clara grabbed a knife from the table, her hands steady now. "Who's there?" she called. "It's Harrow," came the rough reply. Elias relaxed, but only a little. He opened the door, and old man Harrow stepped in, his coat damp, his pipe unlit. His face was grim, his eyes sunken like he hadn't slept since the fire on the shore. "You all right, boy?" Harrow asked, his gaze sharp. He glanced at Clara, then Leela, lingering on her drawing. "That's it, ain't it, the ship?" Leela nodded, her hands still. "I see it when I close my eyes." Harrow cursed, low and rough. "It's spreading. The fog, the whispers. It's not just you now, Elias. Towns talking, fishermen won't go near the water. Say the sea's wrong, like it's breathing." Clara's knife trembled. "Enough, you're scaring her." "Scaring me, it's just fog." "It ain't," Harrow said, his voice hard. "I'd been out there, Clara. Saw the wake again, silver and straight, leading out where no ship should go. My granddad told me about it. The ship sails where the stars don't shine, a place the sea hides where time ain't right." Elias's stomach twisted. He remembered the lanterns, visions of sky without stars, a city under the waves, black and sharp. "What place?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Harrow sat, his hands shaking as he lit his pipe. "The Starless Abyss. Old sailors called it that. A place where the sea drops off, deeper than any chart can measure. No light, no stars, just dark. Said the ship comes from there, or goes there, carrying what it takes." Clara's face paled. "You're saying it's real? This ghost ship, it's real," Elias said, before Harrow could answer. "I was on it. Saw the crew, frozen but alive. Saw my name in a book. Felt something. It's not just a ship. It's a trap." Harrow nodded, puffing smoke. "My granddad said it's bound to something old, something that ain't human. It sails to collect, to keep, and it don't let go easy. Leela's pencil snapped, the sound sharp and the quiet. It wants us, she said, her voice small. I saw it, in my dreams. It wants Elias, and me. Clara grabbed her, pulling her close. No one's taking you. Not the sea, not some cursed ship. But her eyes were wet, and Elias saw fear there, real fear. Like when his father didn't come home. Harrow stood, his pipe forgotten. We need to know more. There's a man in town, old as dirt, used to sail with my granddad, named Silas. He saw the ship back in 23. Might know something. Elias's heart raced. Answers, a chance to understand the ship, the whispers, the pull. Where is he? He asked. Old lighthouse, up the cliff, Harrow said. He don't come down much, says the sea watches him. But he'll talk, if you're brave enough. Clara shook her head. No, Elias stays here. No more chasing stories. But Elias was already standing, the cold in his bones stirring, the whispers humming. I have to, he said. If it's after Lila, after us, I need to know why. Clara's face crumpled, but she didn't stop him. She hugged him, her arms tight, and whispered, Come back, please. He nodded, though he wasn't sure he could promise it. The fog was waiting, and so was the ship. The climb to the lighthouse was steep, the fog thick, the air sharp with that metallic temps. Harrow led, his steps sure despite his age. Elias followed, his boots slipping on wet rocks, his mind full of the ship's eyes, the lantern's glow, the boy's frost-covered arm. The whispers were louder here, weaving through the fog, not calling his name now, but singing, a low, mournful sound, like a scream trapped in time. The lighthouse stood at the cliff's edge, its paint peeling, its light dark. Silas was inside, a bent old man with eyes like clouded glass, sitting by a fire that barely warmed the room. His hands were knotted, his face lined, but his voice was steady when he saw Harrow. You brought trouble, Silas said, his eyes on Elias. I smell it on him. The sea's mark, Elias's skin prickled. I saw the ship, he said, the ship that sailed into nowhere. I need to know what it is. Silas laughed, a dry, rattling sound. You don't want to know, boy, but you're here, so you're already caught. He leaned forward, his eyes glinting. I saw it, long ago. Sailed too close. Saw the crew, frozen, their eyes alive. Saw the lighter lantern, cold as death. Showed me my wife, my son, lost to the waves. I didn't touch it. Ran, but it marked me, same as you. Elias's throat tightened. Marked how? Silas pulled back his sleeve, showing an arm pale and thin, with faint lines of frost, like veins under the skin. It never lets go. You hear it, don't you? The whispers. There its voice, calling you to the abyss. The Starless Abyss. Harrow asked, his voice low. Silas nodded. Where the ship goes, where it's from, a place the sea hides, where the dark is alive. The ship's bound to it, and so are they, the crew, the ones it takes. It's hungry, always hungry. Elias's heart pounded. My pa, he said. I saw his face. Is he there? Silas's eyes softened just for a moment. Maybe it's lying, showing you what pulls you. But if he's there, he's trapped, like the rest, and it wants you next. The whispers surged, filling the room, not in Elias's ears, but in his bones. The fog outside thickened, and the lighthouse shook, a low groan like the ship's timbers. Silas stood, his hands trembling. "It's here," he whispered. "It knows you're asking." Elias ran to the window, the fog swirling, showing glimpses of the sea black, endless, with no stars above. The wake was there, silver and straight, leading out, and in the distance, a pale glow flickered, cold and cruel. The ship was waiting, and the whispers screamed, echoing a silent cry that never stopped. Chapter 7. Blood on the tattered sails. The lighthouse trembled, its stones groaning as if the sea itself pressed against it. Elias Kane stood frozen at the window, the fog outside swirling with shapes' hands, eyes, shadows that weren't human. The silver wake stretched across the black water, leading to a pale glow in the distance, cold and sharp like the lantern's curse. The ship that sailed into nowhere was out there, waiting, its whispers louder now, not just in his head but in the air, a chorus of silent screams that clawed at his heart. Old man Harrow gripped his shoulder, his face pale, while Silas, the ancient sailor, stared into the fire, his frost-veined arm trembling. "It's calling," Silas whispered, his voice thin as paper. "You woke it, boy," asking questions, seeking it. His clouded eyes flicked to Elias, heavy with pity. "You can't outrun what's marked you." Elias's chest tightened. He thought of the book with his name in red ink, the lantern's glow showing his father's face, the boy's warning. "It knows you now." The ship wasn't just a ship. It was a trap, a hunger, and it had Leela's voice in her dreams, Clara's face in the frost. "I didn't mean to," he said, his voice cracking. "I just wanted answers about my pa." Silas laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "That's how it gets you. Promises truth, shows you what you love. Then it takes." He stood, slow and shaky, and pointed to a chest in the corner. Its wood cracked, its lock rusted. "I kept something. From that night in 23, didn't dare touch it, but I couldn't burn it neither." Harrow frowned, his pipe forgotten. "What is it, Silas?" Silas shuffled to the chest, his hands trembling as he opened it. Inside was a scrap of cloth, torn and faded, stained dark with something that looked like blood. He held it up, and Elias's breath caught. It was a piece of sail, tattered, with faint symbols woven into its symbols, like the ones in the book, twisting, alive. The air grew colder, the whispers sharper, and Elias felt the seas pull, like a hand on his heart. "Took it from the shore," Silas said. "Washed up after the ship vanished. Smelled of blood, not salt. I saw it that night. The ship, its sails red in the moonlight, like they were bleeding. Crew were screaming, not with mouths, but with eyes. Something was done on that ship, something wrong." Elias stared at the cloth, his stomach churning. The stains weren't random, they formed patterns, shapes that shifted under his gaze, like the faces in the frost. He saw a circle, a spiral, then something like a claw. "What happened?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "What did they do?" Silas's eyes darkened. "A deal, old as the sea. My granddad's granddad told stories sailors who wanted to cheat death, to sail forever. They called something up, from the deep, where the Starless Abyss lies. Not a god, not a devil, but something older. Gave it blood, gave it souls, and it gave them the ship, but it lied. They didn't sail forever. They're trapped, bound to it, feeding it." Harrow cursed, spitting into the fire. "Blood on the sails. That's what my granddad said. Said the ship don't run on wind, runs on sacrifice." Elias's knees felt weak. He thought of his father, lost to a storm no one could explain. Had he found the ship too? Had he touched the book, the lantern, and paid the price? My pa, Elias said, his throat tight. Was he part of it? Silas shook his head. Don't know, boy. But if he's there, he's one of them now. Frozen, watching, waiting for the next. His eyes flicked to the window, where the fog pressed closer. It's here for you and your kin. The lighthouse shook again, a deep groan from the sea below. The whispers surged, not just in Elias's ears but in his bones, singing of blood, of promises, of a debt unpaid. He thought of Lila's drawings, her voice, it wants us. He couldn't let it take her, or Clara, but the ship knew him, knew his heart, and it wasn't letting go. We need to stop it, Elias said, his voice steadier than he felt. Destroy it. The ship, the book, the lantern, whatever holds. It, Silas laughed again, colder this time. Destroy it. Boy, men stronger than you tried. It's older than us, older than Greyhaven. You can't kill what ain't alive. Then what do I do? Elias's hands balled into fists, the cold in his bones burning now, like frostbite. It's after my sister. My ma, I can't just... Wait. Harrow grabbed his arm, his grip hard. You don't go back out there. Not yet. We need to know more. Silas, you got anything else? Anything to fight it? Silas hesitated, his eyes on the sail fragment. There's a story, he said slowly, a way to break the deal, blood for blood, but it's dangerous. Costs more than you might want to. Pay, Elias's heart raced. Tell me, Silas sighed, his breath rattling. The ship's bound to the abyss, to whatever they called up. Break the bond, you might free the trapped. But it needs something equal a life, maybe more. And you gotta face it, down where the stars don't shine. The whispers screamed, the fog swirling outside, showing glimpses of the ship, its masts black, its sails red, glowing in the dark. Elias's skin prickled. He saw the boy's face in his mind, frost creeping up his arm, his warning, you're bound. He saw his father's eyes, alive in the frost, pleading. I'll do it, Elias said, his voice shaking but firm. Whatever it takes. Harrow's face tightened. You're a fool, boy. But your pose, son. He looked at Silas. We're going with him, to the cliffs. If the ship's here, we face it. Silas shook his head. I'm too old. But I'll tell you this. Watch the sails. The blood's the key. Find where it started. You might find the heart. Elias nodded, his mind racing. The fog was thicker now, the whispers a roar. He thought of Lila, Clara, waiting at home, the ship's hunger reaching for them. He and Harrow left the lighthouse, the sail fragment in Elias's pocket, its weight heavy, like it carried the screams of the crew. The cliffs were slick, the sea below black and endless, no stars above, just a void that swallowed light. The wake was there, silver and straight, leading out. The ship's glow flickered, closer now, its sails red in the fog, like wounds that wouldn't heal. Elias felt the pull, stronger than ever, the whispers singing of blood, of sacrifice, of a debt he didn't owe but had to pay. He thought of his father, trapped, and Leela, dreaming of the ship. He wouldn't let it take them. Harrow, he said, his voice steady. If I don't come back, tell Clara and Lila I tried. Harrow's eyes were hard, but he nodded. You'll come back, boy. You're too stubborn to die. The fog closed in, the ship's glow brighter. the whispers a scream that echoed in the dark. Elias stepped toward the cliff's edge, the sail fragment burning in his pocket, the sea, waiting below, its secrets, red and raw, like blood on the tattered sails. Chapter 8. The Keeper of the Hourglass. The fog clung to Elias Kane like a second skin, cold and heavy, as he stood on the cliff's edge overlooking the Black Sea. The silver wake shimmered below, stretching toward the faint, pale glow of the ship that sailed into nowhere. Its red sails flickered in the mist, bloodstains glowing like fresh wounds. The whispers were a constant hum now, weaving through his bones, singing of blood, sacrifice, and a debt that wasn't his but felt like it. The tattered sail fragment in his pocket burned, not with heat, but with a weight that pressed against his heart. Old Man Harrow stood beside him, his face grim, his pipe unlit, his eyes fixed on the glow. "You sure about this, boy?" Harrow asked, his voice rough but steady. "That ship don't give back what it takes." Elias nodded, though his stomach churned. He thought of Lila's drawings, her voice at once us and Clara's fear, her hands clutching him like he'd vanish. He thought of his father, his face in the frost, eyes alive and trapped. The boy on the ship, frost creeping up his arm, had warned him, "You're bound." Silas's words echoed too, blood for blood. Elias didn't know what it meant, but he knew. He couldn't run. The ship was after his family, and he was the only one who'd faced it and come back. "I have too," Elias said, his voice low. "For Lila, for Ma, for Pa." He touched the sail fragment, its symbols shifting under his fingers like they were alive. "Silas said the blood's the key. I need to find its heart." Harrow spat into the fog. "Heart of a cursed ship ain't no easy thing to find, and it don't want to be found." He handed Elias a knife, its blade worn but sharp. "Take this. Might not help, but it's better than nothing." Elias tucked the knife into his belt, its weight grounding him. The sea below was black, no stars above, just a void that swallowed. Light the Starless Abyss, Silas had called it. The whispers grew louder, not words, but feelings, hunger, longing, a scream caught in time. Elias felt the ship's pull, like a tide in his blood, urging him forward. He climbed down the cliff, his boots slipping on wet rocks, Harrow following, their breaths loud in the silence. At the shore, the water was still, too still, reflecting nothing but darkness. The wake led out a silver thread, and Elias found a small boat Harrow's skiff, tied to a rock, untouched by the fog's strange frost. They climbed in, the oars creaking as Elias rowed, following the wake. The fog thickened, the air sharp with that metallic temps, like blood and rust. The ship's glow grew brighter, its masts looming like bones, its sails red and tattered, dripping with something that wasn't water. The skiff drifted closer, pulled by a force stronger than the tide. The ship towered above, its hull cracked, but glowing, its decks silent but alive. The figures were there, frozen in frost, their eyes glinting, watching. Elias's heart pounded, but he kept rowing, the sail fragment heavy in his pocket. The whispers screaming now, filling his head with images, waves rising, stars falling, a city of black stone under the sea. Then he saw a Thar figure at the bow, its face hidden in shadow, its cloak moving like liquid. It wasn't frozen like the others. It stood, still but alive, its presence heavy, like a storm waiting to break. The whispers came from it, not the crew, not the sea, but it. Elias's breath caught. This was the keeper, the one Silas had hinted at, the one who held the ship's curse. "Who are you?" Elias called, his voice shaking but loud. The skiff bumped against the ship's hull, the wood cold and slick. Harrow gripped his shoulder, his knife drawn, but the figure didn't move. The air grew colder, the whispers a roar. The figure raised a hand, and Elias saw eaten hourglass, its sand black and glittering, held in fingers that were too long, too thin. The sand didn't fall. It hung, frozen, like the crew, like time itself. The figure's voice filled his head, not words, but a feeling, vast, ancient, hungry. You seek, you find, you pay. Elias's legs shook, but he climbed aboard Harrow behind him. The deck was slick with frost, the figure's eyes following, their faces flickering. Clara, Leela, his father, then strangers again. The keeper stood, still, the hourglass glowing, its sand shifting now, slow and deliberate, like it was counting something. "What do you want?" Elias asked, his hand on the knife, the sail fragment burning in his pocket. "Why my family? Why me?" The keeper's head tilted, its face still hidden, but its voice was clearer now, a low hum in his bones. "Blood binds, blood calls. You touched the heart. You are mine." Elias's stomach twisted. The book, the lantern, the sail, they were all part of it, pieces of the ship's curse. He pulled the sail fragment from his pocket, its bloodstains glowing red, the symbols writhing. "This," he asked, holding it up, "is this your heart?" The keeper's hand tightened on the hourglass, and the ship groaned, a deep, living sound. The figures moved, slow and jerky, their hands reaching, frost falling like snow. Harrow cursed, his knife raised, but Elias stepped forward, his heart racing. "Tell me," he shouted, "what did you do to my pate? What do you want with us?" The keeper's shadow grew, swallowing the deck. The hourglass flared, its sand spinning now, fast and wild. Images flooded Elias's mind, sailors on their knees, blood pooling on the deck, a chant to something deep and dark, a promise of eternal life that became a cage. He saw his father, not frozen but standing, his hands red, his eyes wide with fear, reaching for a light that wasn't there. "Your father sought," the keeper's voice said, not in his head but in the air, cold and sharp. "He paid, you seek. You pay." Elias's knees buckled. His father had been here, had touched the curse, had given himself to it. "No," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I won't let you take us." The keeper stepped closer, its cloak rippling, its face still hidden. The hourglass glowed brighter, the sand a storm now, and Elias felt time slip, the deck fading, the sea rising. The whispers screamed, showing him the abyss, a void of black water, no stars, no light, only hunger. The figures closed in, their faces his family's, their hands reaching, frost on their fingers. Harrow grabbed him, pulling him back. "Boy, we gotta go." But the skiff was gone, the sea churning, the ship alive under their feet. Elias clutched the sail fragment, its bloodstains hot now, burning his hand. He thought of Silas's words, blood for blood. The ship ran on sacrifice, on lives given to the dark. He wouldn't let it be Lila or Clara or him. He raised the knife, his hand shaking, and slashed the sail fragment, tearing through the bloodstains, the symbols. The ship screamed, a sound that shook his bones, and the keeper's hourglass cracked, black sand spilling. The figures froze, their eyes dimming, but the keeper's shadow grew, its voice a roar. "You cannot break what binds." Elias stumbled, the deck tilting, the sea rising. Harrow pulled him to the edge, the water black and endless below. "Jump," Harrow yelled, and they did, the cold hitting like a blade. The whispers followed, the keeper's voice in his head. "You are mine." Elias swam, his body numb, the sail fragment still in his hand, its bloodstains dripping into the sea. The fog closed in, the ship's glow fading, but the whispers didn't stop. The keeper was still there, its hourglass broken but not gone, its hunger alive. Elias didn't know if he'd hurt it or made it angrier, but he knew one thing: the ship wasn't done, and neither was he. Chapter 9. Waves of Forgotten Gods. Elias Kane kicked through the black water, his body numb, his lungs burning as the sea tried to drag him down. The fog was a suffocating blanket hiding Greyhaven's cliffs, but the silver wake still shimmered, a cruel guide back to the ship that sailed into nowhere. Old Man Harrow swam beside him, his breaths ragged, his face pale under the frost that clung to his beard. The sail fragment, slashed and blood-stained, was still in Elias's hand, its weight heavy, like it carried the screams of the ship's cursed crew. The keeper's voice echoed in his head. "You cannot break what binds on," the whispers surged. Not just sound, but a force, pressing against his heart. The sea wasn't just water anymore. It moved wrong, curling into shapes' hands, faces, things with too many eyes that vanished when Elias blinked. The waves rose and fell, not with the tide, but with purpose, like they were alive, watching. He thought of the keeper's hourglass, its black sand spilling, the ship's scream as he tore the sail. He'd hurt it, maybe, but it wasn't done. It wanted him, Lila, Clara Hayes' whole family, marked by the curse he'd touched. "Keep going, boy," Harrow gasped, his voice barely cutting through the fog. Shore's close, but the cliffs were hidden, and the sea felt endless, a void with no stars above, no light below. The Starless Abyss, Silas had called it, and Elias felt its pull, like a hunger older than the world. A wave hit, hard and cold, pushing him under. He kicked, breaking the surface, and saw it a shape in the water. Not a wave, but something solid. Rising, its edges sharp and wrong, like the spires of a city long drowned. It glowed faintly, not the ship's pale light, but something greener, deeper, like rot under the sea. The whispers roared, not in his ears but in his bones, singing of forgotten gods, of promises made in blood, of a debt that stretched back centuries. Elias's heart pounded. He saw his father's face in the waves, not frozen but moving, his mouth open in a silent scream. Then Clara's face, Lila's, their eyes wide, pleading. The sail fragment burned in his hand, its bloodstains dripping, mixing with the sea. The waves curled higher, forming shapes, tentacles, claws, things that didn't belong in any story he'd heard. They weren't just waves. They were alive, ancient, and angry. "Harrow," Elias shouted, his voice lost in the roar of the sea. You see that Harrow's eyes were wide, his face white. "Gods help us," he muttered, spitting water. "It's them, the old ones. The ship's bound to M." Elias's stomach churned. Silas's words came back. A deal old as the sea. Something older than gods or devils. The ship's crew had called something up, given blood, given souls, and now the sea itself was waking. Stirred by Elias's defiance, by the torn sail, the cracked hourglass, he swam harder, his arms screaming, but the waves fought back, pushing him toward the glowing shape in the water. It rose higher, a mass of stone and shadow, its surface carved with symbols like the sails, twisting, alive, pulsing with that green light. Elias saw towers, arches, a city that shouldn't exist, its edges sharp as knives. The whispers sang. Louder, not one voice but many, chanting in a language he didn't know but felt deep in his gut. It was hunger, not for food but for lives, for time, for everything he was. Keep moving. Harrow yelled, grabbing Elias's arm, pulling him toward a faint shadow in the fog-the cliffs of Greyhaven. But the sea didn't want to let go. The waves curled tighter, their shapes clearer in eyes, mouths things that watched and waited. Elias's hand tightened on the sail fragment, its bloodstains hot, burning his skin. He thought of Lila's drawings, her voice, "It wants us." The ship wasn't alone. It was part of something bigger, something the sea hid, something that remembered the blood it was owed. The shore was close now, rocks jutting through the fog. Elias's feet hit sand, and he stumbled, coughing, his body heavy with cold. Harrow dragged him up, his hands rough but strong. They collapsed on the beach, the waves still roaring, the green glow fading into the fog. The whispers were softer but not gone, humming like a storm waiting to break. Elias lay there, gasping, the sail fragment clutched tight. Its bloodstains were wet, dripping, though he was sure it had been dry before. He looked at Harrow, whose face was grey, his eyes fixed on the sea. "What was that?" Elias asked, his voice hoarse. "That city." Harrow spat, his hands shaking as he lit his pipe. "The abyss," he said. "Not just a place, a thing. Old gods, maybe, or something worse. My granddad said the ship's tied to M, sails for M. That city, it's theirs. Where they wait." Elias's heart thudded. He thought of the keeper, its hourglass, its voice, "You are mine." The ship wasn't just a trap. It was a servant, carrying souls to something deeper, hungrier. "They want us," he said, his voice trembling. Leela saw it in her dreams. Harrow's eyes darkened. "Then we gotta keep her safe. Your ma, too. The ship's awake now, and it knows you fought it." He nodded at the sail fragment. "That's part of it. Blood on the sails. It's their mark, their deal." Elias looked at the fragment, its symbols glowing faintly, the bloodstains spreading. He wanted to throw it into the sea, but he couldn't. It was a piece of the ship, a piece of the curse, and maybe a piece of the answer. Silas said blood for blood, he said. To break the deal, what does it mean? Harrow shook his head. "Don't know, but it ain't good. Deals like that, told things like that don't break easy. Costs more than you got, maybe." The fog pressed closer, the whispers humming, and Elias felt the cold in his bones. Deeper now, like the sea had seeped inside him. He thought of Clara, Lila, waiting at home, the ship's eyes watching them through the fog. He stood, his legs shaky, the sail fragment heavy in his hand. "I need to get back," he said. "They're not safe." Harrow nodded, his face grim. "Go, I'll watch the shore. But Elias, don't touch the sea again, not till we know more." Elias ran, the fog swirling, the whispers following. Greyhaven streets were empty, the houses dark, the air thick with that metallic tampes. He reached his house, his hands fumbling with the door. Clara was there, her face pale, her eyes red. Leela sat at the table, her latest drawing a mess of black waves, green spires, eyes that glowed like the city in the sea. "Elias." Clara ran to him, her hands on his face, checking for wounds. "You're freezing." What happened? He couldn't speak, not yet. He looked at Lila's drawing, his heart sinking. "You saw it," he said, his voice low. "The city, under the water." Leela nodded, her eyes wide, scared. It's angry, she whispered. It knows you hurt it. Clara's hands tightened on his shoulders. Enough. No more ships, no more sea. You're staying here. But the whispers were louder now, filling the house, and the sail fragment burned in Elias's pocket, its bloodstains dripping onto the floor. The sea was awake, the forgotten gods stirring, and Elias knew the ship wasn't done. It was coming, and it brought the waves of something ancient, something that remembered every drop of blood it was owed. Chapter 10. The Mirror of Endless Eyes. Elias Kane stood in the dim kitchen of his Greyhaven home, the sail fragment clutched in his trembling hand, its bloodstains dripping onto the floorboards. Red and wet, though it shouldn't have been. The fog pressed against the windows, thick as ever, carrying whispers that hummed in his bones, hungry, ancient, calling his name. Clara's hands gripped his shoulders, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. Leela sat at the table, her latest drawing a nightmare of black waves and green spires, eyes glowing in the dark, like the city he'd seen rising from the sea. The ship that sailed into nowhere was out there, its red sails bleeding in the fog. And it wasn't alone. The waves had shown him something older, something that remembered blood. "You're not going back out there," Clara said, her voice sharp but breaking. "No more, Elias. I lost your PA. I won't lose you." Elias wanted to promise he'd stay, but the sail fragment burned in his hand, its symbols twisting, alive. The whispers were louder now, not just in his head but in the air, singing of forgotten gods, of a debt he'd stirred by slashing the sail, cracking the keeper's hourglass. Leela's words echoed. "It's angry. It knows you hurt it." The ship wasn't just after him. It wanted Lila, Clara, maybe all of Greyhaven. "I have to stop it," Elias said, his throat tight. "It's not just me, Ma. It's after Lila. You saw her drawings. It's in her head." Clara's eyes flicked to Lila, who was staring at her paper, her hands still, her face pale. "She's just scared," Clara said, but her voice shook. "It's stories, Elias. Fog and stories. It's real," Elias said, his voice low. He pulled the sail fragment from his pocket, its bloodstains spreading, the symbols glowing faintly. "This came from the ship. It's part of it. And it's not done with us." Leela stood, her eyes wide, and pointed at the fragment. "It's like my dreams," she whispered. "The eyes, they're in there." Elias's stomach twisted. He looked at the fragment, and for a moment, the bloodstains shifted, forming eyes dozens, hundreds, blinking, watching. He dropped it, the cloth hitting the floor with a wet thud. The whispers surged, filling the room, and the fog outside swirled, showing glimpses of the ship, its masts black, its sails red, its deck alive with frozen figures. Clara grabbed Leela, pulling her close. "Enough. We're leaving, inland, away from the sea." Now, but a sound stopped her, a low, creaking groan, like wood bending under strain. It came from the walls, the floor, the house itself. The fog pressed closer, seeping under the door, curling like smoke. Elias's heart pounded. He ran to the window, the glass cold under his fingers, and saw it, a shape in the fog. Not the ship, but something smaller, closer. A mirror, tall and cracked, standing on the street. Its surface black but shimmering, like the sea under the Starless Abyss. "What is that?" Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. Elias's breath caught. The mirror wasn't there before. It stood alone, its frame carved with symbols like the sails, like the books, twisting and alive. The whispers came from it now, not the sea, a chorus of voices, not human, calling him closer. He saw his reflection, but it wasn't right. His face flickered, showing his father's eyes. Clara's mouth, Lila's fear, then strangers, their gazes endless, trapped. "Don't look," Elias said, pulling Lila back, but his own eyes stayed. On the mirror, it showed more than faces, waves rising, a city of black stone, spires sharp as claws, glowing green. Eyes blinked in the dark, not human, not animal, but something older. Watching from the abyss, the whispers sang, promising truth, promising his father's fate, promising everything if he'd just step closer. Elias. Clara's voice snapped him back. She was shaking him, her hands tight. Get away from it. But the mirror pulled, like the book, like the lantern. Elias's feet moved, his body not his own. He stepped outside, the fog swallowing him, the mirror closer now, its surface rippling like water. The sail fragment was in his hand again, though he didn't remember picking it up. Its bloodstains glowed, matching the mirror's light, and the symbols pulsed. Syncing with his heartbeat, a figure appeared in the fog, the boy from the ship. His arm fully frosted now, his eyes sunken, his face half gone. "Don't touch it," the boy said, his voice a rasp. "The mirror's theirs, the gods in the deep. It shows you everything, then takes you." Elias's hand shook inches from the mirror's surface. "What is it?" he asked, his voice trembling. "What do they want?" The boy's eyes darkened. "Your time, your soul, your blood. Same as they took from me, from your pa, from all of Emden." He pointed at the mirror, where faces flickered, hundreds, thousands, eyes endless, trapped in the glass. "It's their window, to see us, to pull us in." Elias saw his father's face again, clear now, his mouth open in a silent scream. He saw Lila, Clara, their eyes alive but frozen, like the crew. His hand moved closer, the sail fragment burning, the whispers screaming, "See, no, join." He wanted answers, wanted to save them, wanted to break the curse. His fingers brushed the glass, cold as death, and the world shifted. He was on the ship, not in Greyhaven. The deck was slick with frost, the crew's eyes watching, the keeper at the bow, its hourglass glowing. The mirror stood before him, taller, its surface black and endless, showing not just faces but world seas boiling, skies falling, a city of green spires rising from the deep, its gods awake, their eyes everywhere. Elias's mind reeled, his body locked, the whispers a roar now, filling him with visions of blood. Sacrifice, a deal that bound the ship to the abyss. He saw the crew, not frozen but alive. Long ago, their hands red, chanting to something in the dark. He saw his father, standing among them, his eyes wide, a knife in his hand, blood on the sails. The mirror showed it all, the deal, the curse, the price. Elias's heart broke, his father's choice clear. He'd given himself to save them, to keep the ship from Greyhaven. But it hadn't been enough. The gods were still hungry. "Elias," a voice cut through Harrow's, rough and real. Elias blinked, the mirror back in Greyhaven street, his hand still on its surface. Harrow was there, pulling him back, his knife slashing at the fog. "Get away from it, boy." Elias stumbled, the sail fragment falling, its blood pooling on the ground. The mirror's light flared, the eyes in it blinking, reaching, and the whispers screamed, angry now, like the gods themselves were waking. The boy's voice came again, faint. "Run, it's not done." Elias ran, Harrow dragging him, the mirror's glow chasing them through the fog. The house was ahead, Clara and Leela at the door, their faces pale. The whispers followed, the eyes watched, and the sail fragment lay in the street, its blood spreading, like the sea itself was bleeding. Elias knew the mirror wasn't just a mirror, it was a door, a window to the forgotten gods, and he'd opened it wider, pulling them closer to Greyhaven, to his family, to him. Chapter 11. The centuries tall Elias Kane stumbled through the fog-choked streets of Greyhaven, his heart pounding, the whispers of the ship that sailed into nowhere screaming in his ears. Old Man Harrow dragged him, his grip iron tight, away from the cracked mirror that stood like a sentinel in the mist, its surface alive with endless eyes. The sail fragment lay abandoned on the ground, its bloodstains pooling, glowing faintly, as if the sea itself wept. Clara and Lila waited at the door of their small house, their faces pale, Clara's hands clutching Lila like she could shield her from the dark. The fog pressed closer, heavy with the metallic temps of blood and rust, and the whispers sang of forgotten gods, of a debt unpaid, of a toll that came every 100 years. Inside, now, Clara hissed, pulling Elias and Harrow. Through the door, she slammed it shut, the wood rattling, but the fog seeped under, curling like fingers. Leela clung to her, her eyes wide, holding a new drawing, eyes hundreds of them, staring from black waves, green spires rising in the background. "What did you do, Elias?" Clara asked, her voice trembling, not with anger but fear. "What's out there?" Elias's throat was dry, his mind still reeling from the mirror's visions, the ship's crew chanting, blood on their hands, his father among them, sacrificing himself to the gods of the Starless Abyss. The mirror wasn't just a window. It was a door, and he'd touched it, opened it wider. "It's the ship," he said, his voice hoarse. "It's not just after me, it's after all of us." Harrow nodded, his face grim, his pipe unlit. The boy's right, not awake now. Hungrier than before. That mirror reads part of it. Like the book, the lantern, the sail. It's all tied to the abyss. Leela's voice was small, barely a whisper. "It's coming, I saw it. In my dreams, it wants someone new." Her hands shook, smudging the charcoal on her drawing. "It always takes someone." Clara's face hardened, but her eyes were wet. "No one's taking you. Not you, not Elias. We're leaving tonight. Inland, far from the sea." Elias wanted to agree, to pack and run, but the whispers were louder now, filling the house. Not just in his head, but in the walls, the floor. The cold in his bones burned, a mark from the book, the lantern, the mirror. "We can't run," he said, his voice steady despite the fear. "It knows us. It'll follow." Harrow spat, his hands shaking. "She's right, boy. You don't fight what's older than the cliffs. But if you stay, you gotta know what you're facing." Silas said, "Blood for blood. The ship's told every 100 years. It takes a soul, a life, something to keep it sailing." Elias's stomach twisted. He thought of the boy on the ship, frost claiming him, trapped for a century. He thought of his father, his face in the mirror, his hands red with blood. "My pa," Elias said, his voice breaking. "He gave himself, didn't he, to save us?" Harrow's eyes softened, just for a moment. Maybe, but it wasn't enough. The ship's still here, still hungry. The house groaned, a low, living sound, like the ship's timbers. The fog outside thickened, and a shadow moved, not the ship, but the mirror, closer now, standing just beyond the window. Its surface rippled, eyes blinking, watching. The whispers roared, Not words, but a demand, a hunger that shook Elias's bones. He saw it then, a pattern, a cycle. The ship came every 100 years, took what it needed, and sailed back to the abyss. His father had been part of it, and now it wanted Elias, Lila, maybe all of Greyhaven. "We need Silas," Elias said, his heart racing. "He knows more about the toll, the deal. We have to go back." Clara grabbed his arm, her nails digging in. "No, you're not leaving this house. I won't lose you." But Lila stepped forward, her drawing falling to the floor. "It's too late, Ma. It's here." She pointed at the window, where the mirror's glow pulsed, its eyes fixed on them. The fog swirled, showing glimpses of the ship, its red sails dripping, its masts black, its deck alive with frozen figures. The keeper stood at the bow, its hourglass glowing, black sand spinning, counting time no one could see. The door rattled, not a knock but a force, like the sea itself was pushing. Elias's hand went to the knife Harrow had given him, its blade cold against his palm. "We can't stay here," he said. "It's coming in." Harrow nodded, his face set, to the lighthouse. "Silas might have answers, but we move fast." They ran, Clara clutching Lila, Elias and Harrow leading, the fog swallowing the streets. The mirror followed, not moving but appearing, always ahead. Its eyes endless, its surface showing faces Elias's father, the boy, strangers trapped for centuries. The whispers screamed, the sea roared beyond the cliffs, and the ship's glow grew brighter, closer, its sails red and wet, its hunger alive. The lighthouse was dark, its door ajar, the air inside cold and sharp. Silas was there, slumped by the fire, his frost-veined arm trembling, his eyes clouded but sharp. "You brought it," he said, his voice a rasp. "The toll's due. It wants payment." Elias's heart pounded. What payment? What does it want? Silas's eyes flicked to the mirror, now standing in the lighthouse's doorway, its glow filling the room. "A soul," he said. "Every century it takes one. Your PA paid, but it wasn't enough. It wants you now, or the girl." He nodded at Lila, who clung to Clara, her face pale. "No," Elias said, his voice fierce. "I'll give it something else. The sail, the mirror, something to break it." Silas laughed, a dry, broken sound. "You can't cheat it, boy." "Tried. My granddad tried. Blood for blood. That's the deal." He pulled a small, cracked vial from his pocket, filled with something dark and thick. "Blood from the sails. Kept it, thought it might help. It's all that's left of the deal they made." Elias stared at the vial, its contents glowing faintly, like the sail's bloodstains. The mirror's light flared, the whispers a scream. Now, and the ship's shadow loomed outside, its masts piercing the fog. The keeper's voice filled his head. "Pay the toll." Elias's hand tightened on the knife, his mind racing. The ship wanted a soul, but Silas's words, blood for blood, gave him an idea. Desperate and dangerous. He grabbed the vial, its glass cold, and ran to the mirror, its eyes watching, hungry. "Take this," he shouted, smashing the vial against its surface. The blood splashed, red and alive, and the mirror screamed, a sound that shook the lighthouse, the cliffs, the sea. The eyes blinked, then dimmed, and the fog swirled, the ship's glow fading, but not gone. The whispers stopped, but the cold in Elias's bones grew sharper, and Lila's scream cut through the silence. She was staring at her hands, where faint lines of frost crept up, like the boy's, like Silas's. The toll wasn't paid. The ship was still waiting, and Elias had only made it angrier. Chapter 12. The Shattered Compass. The lighthouse shook as the mirror's scream tore through the air, a sound like glass and bone breaking together. Elias Kane stood frozen, the shattered vial of blood at his feet, its dark contents seeping into the floor, mixing with the frost that crept up the walls. The mirror in the doorway dimmed, its endless eyes blinking out. But the fog outside pulsed with a sickly green glow, and the whispers of the ship that sailed into nowhere roared back, angrier, hungrier. Lila's scream still echoed in Elias' ears, her small hands trembling as frost traced faint lines up her skin. Like the boy on the ship, like Silas. The toll wasn't paid. The ship was still coming. Clara grabbed Lila, her face white, her voice a desperate hiss. "What did you do, Elias?" She pulled Lila close, checking her hands, her arms, as if she could wipe the frost away. "She's cold, too cold. Old." Manharrow stood by the door, his knife drawn, his eyes fixed on the fog where the ship's shadow loomed, its red sails bleeding into the mist. "You made it mad, boy," he said, his voice rough but steady. "That blooded wasn't enough." Silas, slumped by the dying fire, coughed, his frost-veined arm shaking. "Told you," he rasped, his clouded eyes on Elias. "Blood for blood. The ship don't take half measures. It wants a soul, or it takes more." Elias's heart pounded, his mind spinning with the mirror's visions his father's bloodied hands. The crew's chant, the city of green spires under the sea. The forgotten gods were awake, their hunger alive in the ship, in the fog, in the frost creeping up Lila's skin. He'd tried to break the deal, smashing the vial, but it wasn't enough. The keeper's voice echoed in his head. "Pay the toll." He thought of the boy, trapped for a century. His warning, "It knows you now." "I'll fix this," Elias said, his voice shaking but firm. He grabbed the knife from his belt, its blade still warm from his grip. "It wants me, not her. I'll go back, to the ship." Clara's eyes widened, her hands tightening on Lila. "No, you're not leaving us. I lost your pa, I won't lose you." But Lila looked up, her eyes wide, the frost glinting on her fingers. "It's not just you, Elias," she whispered. "It wants all of us. I saw it, in the mirror, it showed me." Elias's stomach twisted. He remembered the mirror's eyes, endless, showing his father, Clara, Lila, trapped in the glass. "What did you see?" he asked, kneeling beside her. The voice was small, trembling. "The sea, black, no stars. A city all sharp and green. And people, frozen, but their eyes moved. They were screaming, but I couldn't hear them. Then I saw Usu, me, Marn, the ship, with them." Harrow cursed, spitting into the fire. "The abyss. It's pulling you in, boy. You and the girl. You touched its heart, the book, the lantern, the sail. Now it's got its claws in you." Silas nodded, his face grim. "There's a way," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "To break it, blood for blood, like I said. But it's not just a life, it's the heart of the deal. Something they used long ago to bind the ship." Elias's hand went to his pocket, where the sail fragment had been. It was gone, left in the street, but its weight lingered, like a scar. "The sail," he asked. "The blood on it." Silas shook his head. "More than that. They used something a compass, my granddad said. Not for finding north, but for finding the abyss. It's on the ship, with the keeper. Break it, you might." break the deal, but you gotta get to it. Past the crew, past the gods. The lighthouse groaned again, the fog pressing against the windows. The ship's glow brighter now, its masts piercing the mist. The whispers screamed, not just in Elias's head, but in the air, chanting of blood, of time, of a toll unpaid. He felt the pull, stronger than ever, like the sea was in his blood, urging him back to the ship. "We go now," Elias said, standing, his knife tight in his hand. "To the ship, I'll find the compass." Clara grabbed his arm, her nails digging. "In, Elias? No, you're all I have." He looked at her, then Leela, the frost creeping higher on her hands. "I have to, Ma, for you, for her." He turned to Harrow. "You coming?" Harrow's face was hard, but he nodded. "Can't let you go alone, boy. Your pa wouldn't forgive me." They left the lighthouse, Clara and Leela staying with Silas, the fog swallowing the cliffs. The sea was black, the wake silver and straight, leading to the ship's glow. They found Harrow's skiff, untouched by the frost, and rowed the oars. Creaking, the whispers roaring. The ship loomed, its hull cracked but glowing, its sails red and dripping, its deck alive with frozen figures, their eyes watching. Elias climbed aboard, Harrow behind him, the deck slick with frost. The keeper stood at the bow, its hourglass glowing, black sand spinning. Its shadow stretched, its voice in Elias's head. "You cannot break what binds." The figures moved, slow and jerky, their faces flickering. Clara, Lila, his father, with frosted hands. Elias's heart raced. He scanned the deck, looking for the compass. There, near the keeper, on a pedestal of black wood, was a small, rusted compass, its needle spinning wildly, not pointing north but down into the sea. The symbols on it matched the sail, the book, the mirror twisting, alive, glowing green. He ran for it, the figures closing in, their hands cold, their eyes pleading. Harrow swung his knife, keeping them back, but the keeper's shadow grew, swallowing the deck. Elias reached the compass, his fingers brushing its cold metal, and the ship screamed, a sound that shook his bones. The needle spun faster, the whispers. A roar, showing visions of the abyss-green spires, endless eyes, gods waking in the deep. He raised the knife, his hand shaking, and smashed it down. The compass shattered, its glass cracking, its needle stilling. The ship lurched, the figures freezing, their eyes dimming. The keeper's hourglass exploded, black sand spilling, and its voice screamed, "You pay." The deck tilted, the sea rising, waves curling into shape's claws. Eyes, things that weren't waves. Elias stumbled, Harrow grabbing him, pulling him to the edge. The ship was sinking, or moving, or both, heading somewhere no map could follow. They jumped, the water hitting like ice, the whispers fading but not gone. Elias swam, his body numb, the shore a faint shadow in the fog. The ship's glow dimmed, but the cold in his bones stayed, and Lila's frost-covered hands burned in his mind. He'd broken the compass, but the toll wasn't paid. The ship was gone, for now, but the gods of the abyss were still watching, and their hunger wasn't sated. Chapter 13. Into nowheres, Embrace Elias Kane thrashed through the icy black water, his limbs heavy, his breath ragged as the fog swallowed Greyhaven's cliffs. The ship that sailed into nowhere was gone, its glow dimmed, its red sails and frost-covered figures sinking into the starless abyss, or so he hoped. Old Man Harrow swam beside him, his face pale, his gasps sharp in the silence. The shattered compass, Its needle stilled, had broken something, but the whispers lingered, faint but alive, humming in Elias's bones. The cold in his chest burned, a mark from the book, the lantern, the mirror, and now the compass. The keeper's scream echoed in his mind, "You pay." The toll wasn't settled, and Lila's frost-covered hands haunted him, a sign the curse wasn't broken. The sea fought them, its waves curling into Shapesclaw's eyes, shadows of the forgotten gods reaching from the deep. Elias's heart pounded, his thoughts on Clara and Lila, waiting in the lighthouse with Silas. He'd smashed the compass, thinking it would end the ship's hold, but the abyss was still awake, its hunger sharper, angrier. The silver wake was gone, but the sea felt alive, watching, pulling him down. "Keep going, boy," Harrow grunted, his voice weak. The shore was a faint shadow in the fog, the cliffs barely visible. Elias's arms burned, his legs numb, but he swam, driven by Lila's fear, Clara's tears, his father's face in the frost. The waves surged, not natural but deliberate, like the sea itself was the god's hands, refusing to let go. His feet hit sand, and he stumbled onto the shore, coughing, his body shaking. Harrow collapsed beside him, his breath ragged, his hands clawing at the rocks. The fog was thinner here, but it still clung, heavy with that metallic temps of blood and rust. Elias looked back at the sea, black and endless, no stars above, only the void of the abyss. The whispers were soft now, a low hum, but they weren't gone. They never would be. "We hurt it," Elias said, his voice hoarse. "The compass, it stopped the ship, didn't it?" Harrow spat, his face grey. "Maybe, but it ain't done." "You felt it, the seas still angry." He stood, shaky, his eyes. "On the cliffs, we gotta get to your ma and sister. If the frost's on Lila, it's coming for her next." Elias's stomach twisted. He ran, the fog swirling, the whispers following. Greyhaven's streets were empty, the houses dark, the air thick with dread. The lighthouse loomed ahead, its door open, the fire inside flickering weakly. Clara was there, holding Lila, who sat still, her hands frosted, her eyes wide with fear. Silas was slumped by the fire, his frost-veined arm trembling, his face grim. "You're back," Clara said, her voice breaking as she ran to Elias, her hands on his face. "You're alive." But her eyes flicked to Lila, and fear replaced. "Relief, she's worse, Elias." The frost is spreading. Elias knelt beside Lila, his heart sinking. The frost had crept up her arms, faint lines like veins, glinting in the firelight. Her drawings were scattered on the floorships, eyes, green spires, all screaming of the abyss. "Lila," he whispered, taking her cold hands. "I'm here. I won't let it take you." Her eyes met his, not scared but certain. "It's not just me," she said, her voice small. "It's all of us. The ship's gone, but they're still here. The gods, they want their toll." Silas coughed, his voice a rasp. "She's right. You broke the compass, but the deal's older than that. Blood for blood. The ship was their tool, but they don't need it. They're in the sea, in the fog." In her, he nodded at Lila. Then Elias. "In you." Elias's chest tightened. He felt it, the cold, the whispers, the mark of the abyss. He'd touched the book, the lantern, the mirror, the sail, the compass. Each one had bound him tighter. And now Lila was paying for it. "How do I stop it?" he asked, his voice desperate. "Blood for blood, what does it mean?" Silas's eyes clouded, but he leaned forward, his voice low. The deal was made with blood a soul, given freely, to bind the ship to the gods. Your pa gave his, but it wasn't enough. They want more, always more. To break it, you gotta give what they took. A life, maybe yours, maybe hers, offered to the abyss. Clara's face crumpled. No, no one's giving anything. We're leaving, far from the sea. But the lighthouse groaned, the fog pressing against the windows, and the whispers surged. Not in Elias's head, but in the air, chanting of blood, of time, of a debt unpaid. The sea roared outside, waves crashing like thunder, and a green glow pulsed in the fog, sharp and wrong, like the city he'd seen under the water. Elias stood, his knife in hand, his heart racing. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady despite the fear. "I'll go to the sea. If they want me, they can. Have me, not Lila." Clara grabbed him, her nails digging in. "Elias, no, you're my son. I won't lose you." But Lila stood, her frosted hands trembling, her eyes fierce. "It's not just you," she said. "I see it. The abyss. It's here." She pointed at the window, where the fog swirled, showing glimpses of green spires, eyes blinking in the dark. The sea was rising, climbing the cliffs, its waves alive, reaching. Harrow cursed, his knife drawn. "We can't stay. The sea's coming in." Silas nodded, his face grim. "Go to the cliff's edge. Face it there. Blood for blood. One of you, or all of you." Elias didn't wait. He grabbed Lila's hand, her frost cold against his skin, and ran, Clara and Harrow following. The fog was a wall, the whispers a scream, the sea roaring louder, its waves curling into shapes tentacles, claws, gods waking from the deep. They reached the cliff, the water below black and endless, the green glow brighter. Spires rising from the waves, real now, not visions. Elias stood at the edge, Lila beside him, Clara clutching them both. The sea churned, the abyss alive, its eyes everywhere, its hunger a force that shook the cliffs. The whispers chanted, the keeper's voice clear, "Pay the toll." Elias saw his father's face in the waves, his eyes pleading, trapped. He saw the boy, frost claiming him, his warning, "You're bound." "I'm here," Elias shouted, his voice lost in the roar. "Take me, leave them." The sea surged, a wave rising, not water but shadow, green and sharp, its eyes fixed on him. Lila's hand tightened, her voice small but strong. "No, Elias." Together. Before he could stop her, she stepped forward, her frosted hands raised, her eyes locked on the sea. "You can't have him," she said, her voice clear. "Take me." "No." Elias grabbed her, pulling her back, but the wave crashed, not water but power, cold and ancient, wrapping them both. Clara screamed, Harrow swung his knife, but the sea was stronger, its gods awake, their hunger endless. Elias felt the cold in his bones surge, the mark of the abyss claiming him, Lila. Everything dut. Then he saw it a flicker in the wave, not eyes but his father's face, clear, not screaming but smiling. "Go back," his father's voice said, not in the whispers but in his heart. "Live." The wave pulled back, the green glow dimming, the whispers fading. The sea stilled, the spires sank, and the fog lifted. Just enough to show the cliffs, the shore, Greyhaven's lights. Elias fell to his knees. Lila beside him, her frost gone, her hands warm. Clara held them, sobbing, and Harrow stood guard, his knife still drawn. The sea was quiet, the abyss silent, but Elias felt it, watching, waiting. He'd offered himself, Lila had too, but something his father maybe had paid the toll instead. They walked back to the house, the fog thinning, the whispers gone. But Elias knew the truth. The ship was part of him now, its mark in his bones, its gods in the deep. He'd saved Lila, Clara, Greyhaven, but the abyss remembered, and one day it would call again.